All right, let's talk about the Big Ten now. First and foremost, let's start with the winner of the Big Ten last year, Michigan. It's worth reminding you all that the NCAA is Jim Harbaugh's bitch, and so is Ohio State. 2 years in a row, I think they've beaten Ohio State, going for a third year in a row. Probably the best backfield in the country, pound for pound, between Blake Corum, who was on possibly a Heisman tear last year before getting injured late, and Donovan Edwards, who's a former five-star running back. They've still got J.J. McCarthy there as the starting quarterback. They got a hell of a defense. They should be right at the top of the Big Ten once again. Consensus here with the people that know things. This is kind of a three-team race at the top of the Big Ten right now. We'll talk about each of those three teams. But Michigan, strong team once again, and they will be playing basically like they have the last several years under Jim Harbaugh, just punching you in the face and likely running for 300 yards and winning by 40 in the process just about every single week. Ohio State. No idea what they're going to get at quarterback. Is it going to be Kyle McCord? Is it going to be Devin Brown? I think Kyle McCord has officially been named the starter at this point, but will he stay in the starting lineup? I don't know. What I do know is they have one of the best backfields in the entire country. Maybe not pound for pound as good or highly touted as the Michigan one, but Mayan Williams and TreVeyon Henderson, nothing to sneeze at. Very, very good starting backfield. Two guys that came in the same class together. They've been there last 2 years, just, wreaking havoc in that backfield. They've got the Blitnikoff winner of last year, probably a top 5 pick in this upcoming draft, in Marvin Harrison Jr. Living up a lot to that namesake. I'll tell you what, right now, he is an absolute physical freak, and that's not all they had. They got Emeka Egbuka out there. They did lose Jackson Smith and Jigbo, but if there's one thing we know about Ohio State, it's wide receiver man. They just keep reloading and reloading and reloading. And that defense on the other side, JT Tuimoloau, a guy that you may have heard of a little bit last game, absolutely wrecked a couple games last year. I think the Michigan State game in particular, he was a monster in. He's probably going to have to step up big time this year, but that defense is going to be oh so ferocious this year if I had to guess. Ohio State should be right back there in the thick of things once again down the stretch, but they are not going to be alone in the Big Ten, because a third team that is really starting to make waves this offseason, Penn State, is shaping up to have the best team that James Franklin has ever had while in State College, PA. Starting at, not a true freshman, second-year player in Drew Aller, former five-star quarterback, big mean cuss out there at quarterback. He's a highly touted guy, probably the most highly touted guy to take over thus far. They got a nasty defense over there. They are just absolutely loaded with talent on both sides of the ball. Drew Aller steps in after, the 10 years that Sean Clifford played for Penn State. Very good things being heard over there. I think there's a lot of hype around Drew Aller this year. If he lives up to that hype, this team is going to be every bit as good as those two I just mentioned, Ohio State and Michigan. Those three, though, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, one of those three, if not two of those three, are going to make the college football playoff in all likelihood, unless they just absolutely cannibalize each other and maybe get another loss in there throughout the course of the season. That's your three-team race, though, in the Big Ten right now. It is going to be a fun watch to see those teams throughout the course of this year. Purdue lost Jeff Brown, like I just talked about, to Louisville. Aiden O'Connell is now Jimmy G's backup with the Raiders. So prepare for pain. That's pretty much the only thing I can say. If they make a bowl, it'll be a miracle. That's really all I have to say about that. Illinois, Brett Bielema is back in the Big Ten. Bielema ball is back in full swing, but they lost a bunch of players to the draft on both sides of the ball. Got Luke Altmaier, I think his name is, former Ole Miss QB that didn't stick at Ole Miss. I don't think very highly of him, but maybe that's just my Mississippi State bias because he's a former Ole Miss guy. I don't know. They lose Chase Brown as well out of that backfield. He got drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals, you may remember. They got a bunch of guys on the defensive side that got drafted over the course of this last season. So they're replacing a lot of guys, but they've got some guys that they're very excited about at receiver over there. Luke Altmaier, we'll see what happens there at quarterback. Defense, we'll have to see what goes there. But, Bielema ball is an effective style of play that wins you games that you may not expect to have won before. So I'm not counting them out. I think Illinois is going to be okay. They're going to be feisty, and maybe they give a couple of those teams at the top a run for their money throughout the course of the year. Who's to say? Iowa, offensive coordinator is the head coach's son. That offensive coordinator's contract basically says score 25 a game or get the hell out of town. And the whole team can't stop gambling on their own team. The Cyhawk game was an absolute controversy fest. I'll tell you what, on both sides of the coin there. We'll talk about Iowa State here in just a bit, but Iowa, I mean, they got a bunch of players suspended for gambling on just basically that game and just gambling on games throughout the course of the season. That being said, still might win 10 games because the Big Ten West is an absolute joke, and Iowa still plays absolutely nasty defense. Best scoring defense in college football last season, if I'm not mistaken. So looking forward to more 10-7 final scores in Iowa City this season. That's where I'll leave that. Minnesota, PJ Fleck is still there. Do I know a single other person on that team? No, I don't. But PJ Fleck is still getting the boys going. Look for another 7-6 year down there in Minnesota. I say down there, it's definitely up there, but I'm not changing. It's down there. Maryland, Talia Tagovailoa, brother of Tua, better at not getting concussions, I'll tell you that right now, is back for one more year with Mike Locksley at Maryland. Mike Locksley's been doing a very good job at Maryland, but he's, got his work cut out for him. In the Big Ten East, you can only be so good. They're getting rid of that division format after this year. Thank God. The divisions format directionally is a joke. I mean, it's a joke in the SEC too. I mean, Mississippi State's been trapped in the SEC West for time immemorial. I'm ready for that to be done. I mean, I'm going to miss the rivalry games with, like LSU and Auburn from year to year. But I'll tell you what, it's going to be great to not have to play that SEC West schedule every single goddamn year. I think Maryland's feeling the same way about the Big Ten East having to play Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan every single goddamn year. But they have to play them one more time. So I think they'll be similarly okay like they were in 2022. Wisconsin. Brace yourselves for culture shock, people. Luke Fickell is the new head coach over there. He got poached from Cincinnati, and maybe the biggest shocking hire of the offseason. I don't think anyone thought, I certainly didn't think he was going to leave Cincinnati for any other job other than Ohio State. I guess Wisconsin just gave him an offer he simply couldn't refuse. He goes over to Wisconsin, and not only do you have Luke Fickell there, Luke Fickell now brings in UNC's high-octane offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, with him. Plug in former SMU quarterback Tanner Mordecai for his 11th year in college football, and this offense is going to look dramatically different from the Paul Chryst era. I can guarantee that right now. It's not going to be ground and pound, 3 yards in a cloud of dust every down. It's still going to be physical just because of the personnel they have, but I expect a lot more downfield shots, expect a lot more explosive offense. If you watched any of Phil Longo's offense at North Carolina, you understand that this offense is going to be a fun thing to watch if they can do it the way that Phil Longo wants them to. Worth noting, though, Braylon Allen, my favorite physical freak from 2 years ago when he was just a babe, a 6'2", damn near 240-pound freshman just running through people, getting like 7 yards a carry. He's still there, probably his last year in college if he knows what's good for him. Should still feature heavily in the backfield this year, which is why I think they're still going to have a big physical element. You'd be stupid not to with having Braylon Allen in there, and with just being first year out of the Paul Chryst era, has to be a little bit of easing into that new way of life, if you will. But expect a lot more explosive play from that offense this year. This Wisconsin team is going to be one of the big question marks throughout this year, and I am excited to see what they put out on the field this coming season. Michigan State. Boy, have things gone downhill for Mel Tucker since he signed that $95 million contract before last season. Had a terrible year last year, bad defense, and all they did this past offseason was lose their starting quarterback, Peyton Thorne, and best wide receiver, Keon Coleman, their two best players on offense last year, to the portal after spring ball, no less. They were on the team for spring ball, then that portal period opened up after spring ball. Both of them got out of there. Peyton Thorne now with Auburn, Keon Coleman, like I just talked about, is down with FSU. Both of those guys, I think, in probably a little bit better situations than they were with Michigan State. So, with all that said, I don't see this team being better than last season. I see them probably being worse. And what does Michigan State do? Because they are basically trapped in that contract with Mel Tucker because of how crazy that buyout is. This is not a Texas A&M situation where Jimbo Fisher is dealing with the oil money, where that buyout would have to be $100 million for those boosters to even bat an eye and not fire Jimbo Fisher if he has a bad year this year. It's not like that at Michigan State. They got some wealthy donors, but they're not that wealthy. Mel Tucker's not going anywhere, and I just don't see it getting any better. Boy, are things about to get uncomfortable up there in East Lansing. Up next, we got Indiana. Can't even name a single player on this roster. Not even going to lie. Maybe they'll be good, maybe they'll be bad. I don't know. I don't feel qualified to even answer that right now. Rutgers, Greg Schiano has yet to reclaim that old glory from his previous tenure at Rutgers, and I don't see that changing this season. I think they're still going to be pretty bad because it's Rutgers. They should be a basketball school. The basketball team looks like it's going to be good this year. So take solace in that. You just got to grit and bare your teeth through football season. Boy, there it is, basketball season right around the corner. You'll be there in no time, guys. You just got to get through this uncomfortable part. Nebraska, good news is you got Matt Rule, who I think will eventually get this team competing with the big dogs in the Big Ten. I think he's shown that time and time again, whether it be with Temple or with Baylor before that. We can just forget about the Carolina Panthers because that's pro ball. That doesn't even count. Pro ball doesn't matter when it comes to a college football head coach's acumen at coaching college. Just look at Urban Meyer, absolute psychopath that could win games in college, absolute psychopath that no one liked in the NFL and lost every single game basically that was worth a damn. So that's cool. Matt Rule will get this thing going eventually. Bad news is Matt Rule almost never does well in year one. You can go back to Baylor, you can go back to Temple, you can go back even farther before that. He is not a very good year one coach. A lot of instilling culture in that year one. Maybe it's a little bit different in the transfer portal era. Maybe they'll be better than they were last year. The bar is not particularly high to exceed what they did last year, but I don't think they're going to be competing nearly at a level that they will be down the road this particular year. It's going to be a rebuilding year. So hopefully there's an exception. I don't see that being an exception this year, though. I think they're going to have kind of a down year, but look forward to the next 2 or 3 years, because I think Matt Rule is going to have this rig rolling sooner rather than later. Excuse me. And final team in the Big Ten, we have got Northwestern. And this team was already shaping up to be the worst in the conference. Then Pat Fitzgerald, longtime head coach there, got some NFL looks throughout the course of his time at Northwestern. He got fired for a hazing scandal throughout this offseason, and it'll be a miracle if Northwestern wins a game this year. They are just putrid, terrible, one of the worst teams in all of college football this season. So that's your Big Ten preview right there. And if I had to guess, you know what? Do I pick Penn State? Do I think they've got what it takes? I think they got what it takes to maybe win this year, but I think maybe they're a year ahead of schedule. I think they're going to have an even better team next year. Who am I thinking? It's either Michigan or Ohio State. You know what? I'm going to go with Ohio State. I think Ryan Day is backed up against the wall. I think he knows that if he doesn't win against Michigan this year, he's not going to get fired, but things are going to get very, very uncomfortable for him this offseason. I think there's a desperation there. I think they have a loaded roster there outside of the quarterback, and I think they get him this year. I think they get Michigan, and they win the conference of the Big Ten, probably go to the playoff on that strength. If they don't go to the playoff, I would be absolutely shocked if they won the Big Ten. But there's your Big Ten preview.